Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about the 1973 science fiction film Fantastic Planet. This film was a co-production between France and Czechoslovakia. The film was directed by René Laloux, and it was written by Laloux and Roland Topper. Was a real Renaissance figure, was part of the Panic movement, a movement of artists around the mid-century, surrealist, confrontational art. The film was based on the novel by Stéphane Wool. So this is based on the French science fiction novel. Let me pull up some poster art here for the film. I guess here is film was put out by Criterion. You can kind of see the picture there of one of the creatures in the film. This movie was, as I said, it's an animated film, and it's about a planet where you have two species. One is dominant and the other serves the other species, so it's very allegorical in that sense. And the film has a very provocative beginning to it, where basically the Draags are the giant creatures and the Ohms are the small human beings. The Draags are blue creatures, they're giants, they have technology, they kind of have a New Age theology, I guess you could say, while the Ohms, the humans, are much smaller and really considered a pest, and I'll talk more about that. But the movie begins with a very provocative shot where we see a young woman holding a baby, and it looks like she's being chased by something, and then out of nowhere we see a gigantic hand grab her and pull her up on the child and basically begin to kind of toy with her, okay? And then the hand drops the woman and she dies, okay? That's how the movie begins. So the Draags basically view the Ohms as playthings, as pets that they play with. They're for children, all right? And you have the domesticated Ohms and the Ohms who live in the wild, who are considered a pest, and the Draags are always trying to exterminate them and clear them out. So we follow the main character in the film, who is the young baby at the beginning of the film, and basically the boy is raised by the Draags and becomes like a pet, a plaything for them, and becomes domesticated. Eventually he escapes and ends up with other Ohms who live in the wild, is basically what happens in the story. So, as I said, this movie it's a really head trip type of movie. This is where the music in the film is very psychedelic, kind of prog rock psychedelia music we have in this film by Allegorical. I don't speak the language, so I'm not sure, but just a real kind of prog score with comparable to Pink Floyd around that time, but it's just a lot of reverb and things like that in the music. So it has that score, and as I said, this movie is hypnotic, and the fact is that we see so much cruelty in this film, and it's handled in a really clinical way, which I think makes it very unnerving to watch this film. Right, I said, right from that opening shot of the mother and the child, and we see them do things like they put a shock collar on the Ohm, and they have scientists who study the Ohms and figure out what they should do with them, trying to figure out their intelligence. the allegory, there's just multiple levels of looking at this movie as an allegory, whether it's a movie about how us human beings treat animals we consider lesser than us. There's also parallels in here of colonialism, of racism, all these things, of the idea of a dominant group looking down and dominating another group, and what the dynamic is between them. So there's just a lot of different allegorical ways to read this. So the Draags have high technology, but they also have this strange spiritual system where they go into meditation, and they seem to become go through a sort of transcendence situation when they're in meditation. So all that's really interesting. But once the Ohm escapes from the people that are keeping him, he finds some others who live in the wild, and we see how awful they're treated by the Ohms. We see two sequences of cruelty. One where they're like being swept into a vacuum cleaner type thing, which is a horrifying scene, and in the other scene they are basically trapped into these like bowls or something. So it's really unnerving in that way. Poison gas. It's like a giant kind of poison gas things are used against them, and then or they'll send people in to just squash these people like bugs. So it's very unnerving. So, but eventually though the Ohms are able to fight back, where they learn how to use tools, and eventually they learn how to use technology, and even as far as rocket technology goes and things like that, and they're able to strike back violently against them, and we see the Ohms are capable of cruelty and violence as well. So there's a really another upsetting scene where they're attacked by this terrifying bird who kills a few of them. Then they kill the bird, and then they they mutilate the bird and drink its blood. So there is like this idea of the oppressed also are capable of committing cruelties. Okay, so the movie takes these questions about it, and the idea that Draags don't even really, the fact that they're doing things that are harming other living beings doesn't even really occur to them really. So there is that interesting dynamic there. I know parallels were made to the Algerian War as well in this film, with between France and Algeria in the 1950s and 1960s as well. But ultimately, though, this movie becomes a freedom struggle with the Ohms, and how they are able to liberate themselves in this fantastic world, as the title goes. So overall, my thoughts on this movie: it isn't one of the. It does what really good sci-fi does, where it takes like the world you're used to and it flips everything, where usually the people, or in science fiction that we see the bad people are usually, they don't look like us, but in this movie the Ohms are human beings. They look like us, so that I think that messes with our mind quite a bit when we see that happening. So there's a lot of the movie just from a sociological perspective, the movie just makes you consider power dynamics and how they work, and the ethics of how people should treat each other. It's really an acidic commentary on humanity throughout this movie that we have, and the animation is absolutely stunning throughout the film. You might think of it as simplistic, but it's almost suggestive sometimes, the animation in this film, where we see like there's this mating ritual scene among the Ohms, and it's kind of suggestive. We don't really see everything, but there's examples of that, and the same with the way the meditations are handled with the Draags, and it's almost more expressionistic of how things like that are expressed through animation in the film. So So it's there. So it's it's an interesting movie. It might make you squirm a little bit, just as far as how this movie handles issues like cruelty and violence and in nature and things like that. It's a challenging film, but ultimately, though, it's a very thought provoking movie on all fronts. So highly worth checking out, especially if you like animation. This is a movie, really a must-see film. So those are my thoughts on Fantastic Planet. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.